The top boss of the BBC says that being progressive and diverse is something to be proud of.
That's right. It was a leaked recording. Director General Tim Davies said the corporation was impartial and did not have a party political bias. It's a little bit complicated, this. So let's bring in former BBC executive presenter Roger Bolton. Good morning, Roger. We don't want to be misquoting Tim Davies here. This was an internal speech that he was giving to employees, and he says we do a reasonably good job of walking along the joyous tightrope of the culture wars. I think he has his tongue in his cheek a little bit when he's saying that. He said we're being progressive and diverse and doing the things we should be proud of is not woke, but we've got to make sure we're clearly representing views from across the board. Do you see anything wrong in that?
No, this is 3 years old, this story, and is clearly part of the Daily Mail and often the Daily Telegraph's attempt to run a difficult story for the BBC as often as possible. I mean, you wouldn't want the Director General of the BBC to say, we're going to be regressive, not progressive. And it depends what he means by it. He said, or the BBC seemed to say, look, he was referring to lots of things like, don't let's get hung up on the old ways of doing things. You know, if we do things cheaper, better, easier, digitally, we should do it. And obviously, the BBC is both a very large employer as well as a broadcaster. So, you know, anything it does to, if you like, ensure that women are paid as well as men, which was a thing it didn't do in the past, is a good thing. Is that progressive? Is that a good? I would say so. Anything that makes sure that you don't have people, because they're gay, facing discrimination, that's a good thing. So I don't think it's particularly bad. What I think is dangerous is this use of the word woke all the time, with nobody defining what it is.
Do you know what it means, Roger? When you use the word, if you ever use the word woke, it's such. I don't like it as a word. I've said that on this channel many times because I think it is so difficult to define.
It is very difficult to define, and I think that it's one of those things. Words that people don't like defining because they like to create an impression. We all know what it means, don't we? Actually, what it means is we all give our own interpretation of what it means. And I just wish there were more facts. I mean, for example, to go back to another story we're doing, that you're doing, which is obviously a very important story about the Sadiq Khan and so on. Nobody's actually going to the man who's making the accusation about Islamist running, Sadiq Khan, and saying, where's the evidence? So before we debate it, can we have some evidence? And before we discuss what woke is, can we have some definitions about what woke is? And before we say progressive, oh, that's terrible. Think, do we want to be regress? I just think that a lot more journalism is needed before we launch into this. And this, by the way, the BBC.
The closest I think that I've got to understanding the difference between what used to be termed political correctness. Yeah. So it used to be that language was evolving to represent our reality, which meant not just saying Mrs. if you were a married woman because you might not have taken that. And a lot of it is about language, just moving with the times. Where I think it tips over into what I would recognise as being woke is that you have to speak in this way or you are a bad person. It becomes more authoritarianism, and that's then becomes... It provides an environment which actually causes the opposite of what we want, which is for people to feel they can speak freely.
I think that's absolutely right, and it's a very important point. And I think it's far too often two things happen. First of all, if you're faced with a difficult argument, they attack the individual, or they say the language is wrong. And what they don't do is address the issue. Now, there's a real issue on immigration, which we don't talk about, which is... we've got an aging population. The birth rate is very low. We need, if we're going to grow the economy, to actually have immigrants. But what we then don't say is, well, what sort of immigrants? And that gets very difficult because people are, I agree with you, are quite scared to say, well, actually, what we want people in this country, we want people who are skilled, we want people who work hard, and we want people who understand our culture. And what we don't want is our culture to fundamentally change.
But that you'll never hear on the BBC, Roger Bolton.
You do?
You don't hear that on the BBC. You'll never hear that on the Today programme. You'll never hear... If somebody said that on Question Time, the shrieks of outrage, the pearls that would be clutched at that moment in that
nobody
audience.
would say on your show, let me put it the other way, nobody would say on your show, or rarely, that actually, Brexit, which was supposed to deliver a reduction in immigration, hasn't. That actually what we've seen is a lot of European people who worked very hard in this country go away. And that actually what we've seen, a very considerable increase in people from the third world and elsewhere. And a lot of them refugees deserve to be here. But actually, the people who voted for Brexit have got the immigration they didn't want. Now, that's something you should have a conversation about.
How have you got this onto Brexit? Once a BBC man, always a BBC man. You always manage to get it onto Brexit.
There's a very good argument for Brexit in terms of sovereignty.
Yeah.
What there isn't a good argument on in the short term is what it's done to our economy. Goldman Sachs have published a report saying we are 5% less now in GNP than we would have been. Now, who knows about the long term? But we do know the big deal promised with America has gone, isn't there? The big deal with India isn't there. China, really? You want to deal with that?
Give it time, Roger.
Both sides
give it time. Give it time. 45 years deal. We were in that relationship for 45 years, being told what to do by 27 countries. I'm still glad we Brexited.
Roger, we've got to go.
Right.
Thank you so much. But also the issue, thank you. Always nice to see you. Great to hear your thoughts.